Welcome to our channel Top Reddit Story. Make sure to subscribe our channel and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our hardest to reply your comment. People of Reddit with scars, what is your worst story behind them? I have 3 different cigarette burns on my right arm that have never went away. The first one came from me being incredibly drunk and telling my friends that they could burn me with it if they wanted because mama didn't raise no itch. The second one was from being really drunk a different time and my friends telling me that I was afraid to get burned with a cigarette again because it hurt too bad the first time. The third time, you guessed it, my mom also gets really upset every time she sees them. I can't tell if she's crying because she's upset that I permanently scarred my body, or if they're tears of joy because she can die knowing that she, in fact, didn't raise no itch. My 6-inch emergency C-section scar. I woke up 7 months pregnant to go to bathroom and right when I stepped on the floor, a huge gush then splash. I yell for my husband to turn on the light and it's all blood. I run to the bathroom gushing blood everywhere and sit on the toilet because I was in shock, shaking and didn't know what else to do as my husband called an ambulance. They put me in surgery right away. I lost 25% of my blood in the hospital, not counting ambulance and my home. My 3-pound daughter survived being 2 months early. My father, who went to Vietnam twice, came to the house to clean up while I was in the hospital and said he didn't know if he'd see me alive again by the amount of blood there was. We are 2 lucky girls. A few months ago, I was sleeping and was shifting a bit in my bed. My face hit the corner of my wooden headboard, which is considerably sharp. I was pretty sleepy, so I didn't realize what had happened till I woke up. I woke up to red covering my face, which was pretty scary. I had a scar at my left eyebrow but it faded. My brother and I had one of those toy castles as a kid and he fell off the top bunk bed and landed on it with his rib cage. I'm glad you're okay though. I laughed and went back to sleep. The gash down my leg I got when struggling to free myself from an assaulter. I try to see it as a reminder that I did get away. It's a reminder of your strength. You were able to fight harder, physically and mentally, than your attacker. You won. Thanks, friend. That's a helpful affirmation. Not me, but my mother. I don't remember exactly how many she has, but somewhere around 15-20 on each arm. They're not small but not huge, just enough to cover most of her forearms. And it's kind of my fault. When I was very small, I was feeding my dog, a lab, and my uncle's dog, an untrained Rottweiler, some leftover waffles. Uncle's dog stole one as I was feeding it to my dog and bit my thumb in the process. My mom yelled no at him and he walked to the back of the yard, then charged full speed at me. Not my mom, who had shouted at him, but at me, the crying toddler. My mom got there just in time to shield me from the attack. She always says it was the worst moment of her entire life, though not the pain. She says the worst part was wondering if she could run fast enough to get me out of the way. When I was a baby I always cried. My mother didn't know what was the problem so she just gave more food, because it seemed to work. It got so bad that when I was 2 months old my intestines got all tangled up and I was going to die. So I went through a surgery and the doctor who was operating said he had to rearrange my intestines so it won't happen again. Ever since that day I have a big scar on my belly. In short, I had to go through a surgery while I was 2 months old. This happened in a 2-bedroom hotel apt. Me and a friend were going to beat up, in a friendly way, another friend. We hit him and we retreat, but he shuts off the light and roars. I freak out and try to run away. I graze my side on the doorknob, and it left a nasty scar. I tell people I woke up in a bathtub full of ice after a shady spa treatment, slightly hinting they took my kidney. Nice. That's funny. I have a 4-inch long scar on my side. I got it when I was a kid trying to catch bees. Stupid, I know. By jumping in the air towards low-hanging branches to catch the bees in a bucket. One time I jumped up but had a little bit of sideways momentum and impaled myself on the handle of an outdoor caged enclosure that held chickens. After unimpaling myself, I told my teacher what happened and she just said to rub soap and water on it. No idea how I didn't get an infection or something, but it healed up fine as far as I remember. I have around 8 scars on my arm because I fight and wrestle with my Doberman. Not like fight, just like shoving and playing. How old is your Doberman? About 3 now. Not too old. It's not where I have big scars, but they're just tiny. 12 years of self-harm. I got help and don't do that anymore. I wish I hadn't. But I'm not ashamed of my scars anymore. My arms and legs are covered in them to the point where my arms are almost all scar. But I don't mind. It's proof that I survived. After my dad threw my mom against a wall while drunk. He cut me with a kitchen knife when I stood between him and my mom. In college I was dealing with serious depression mania and had been struggling for years. I ended up cutting up my wrists and being admitted to the psych ward of our local hospital. Worst day of my life. I had to leave school afterward and come home for treatment. While I have to manage my mental health, I have been functioning and doing pretty well for years. However, I now have faded scars running up the inside of my forearms. I forget about them a lot because I'm used to them. But every once in a while I remember that they are there and wonder how many people I know have noticed them and can tell what they're from. Playing hide and go seek as a kid. It was dark and I tripped on a small hole in the ground. My knee smashed into a rock. It ripped through my jeans and left me with a deep gash, from what I remember. I passed out. Still have a scar from it. What makes it so bad is that I was so excited about this outing with my best friends and I was supposed to spend the weekend with them. But instead I had to get stitches and spend the weekend in bed. Worst part is that it happened less than 5 minutes after the game started. Putting weight on. Like stretch marks? Got bit by a brown recluse spider in my sleep. My third coward got me in my own bed. Anyway. The scar looks exactly like a cigarette burn. So sometimes for fun I say I got drunk with my friends and told them they could burn me because mama didn't raise no itch. In reality, I had a big gaping hole of rotting flesh on my right forearm for a couple months. I could see the bone. My father was a drinker and a fiend, and one night he goes off crazier than usual. Modifying my Nerf gun. I scraped my knuckle on the rug too many times dealing with a strip screw. That's a pretty bad story. Perhaps my worst. I have a scar on my finger from a dog bite. We had got this 3-year-old husky from the shelter that was very passive and didn't like to be near people. So once we brought it home he was being nice. So then we decided it would be a good idea for it to meet my grandma's small, very playful dog. The next thing you know, the husky takes my grandma's dog by the neck and starts shaking, so I grab the husky's jaw and try to peel him off of my grandma's dog, who was bleeding everywhere. I would have torn my entire finger off if my grandma didn't come in and tear him off of my grandma's dog. My finger was bleeding really bad and I was crying so hard. I was 12 at the time. Looking back at it, I ultimately feel bad for the dog. He waited so long to be taken in from the shelter, and when he did he got spooked from another dog. This could ultimately be from a past experience that the husky had no control of. Right when the husky let go, he ran into the corner where he has been hiding that day and started crying. I had been emotionally attached to that dog, and that's what broke my heart the most. That's what left the biggest scar. I have a 3-stroke 4-inch scar on my pinky finger from where I busted out a window to rescue a 4-year-old from a house fire. Then performed CPR on her until medics arrived, 10 minutes or so. Unfortunately, the 4-year-old didn't survive. Hid close to home because my daughter was 5 at the time and we go to church with the family. You're still a hero. That scar is proof that you gave your all. And I know her parents are still thankful to this day. I will share my 3 worst. Scarface scar. When I was 3, I was jumping on my mom's bed. Slipped. And busted my eyebrow open and needed 28 stitches. Shin scar. This one still hurts. I jumped into a river from a cliff without checking the depth. Went chin first into a boulder. Tore all kinds of skin meat off the day before football practice started. Ankle scar. Channeled my inner Jeff Hardy, wrestler, and performed his finishing maneuver to my pillow opponent. My ankle scrapped the side of the bed and tore all the skin off, exposing the meat. I was 14 and had so much fun explaining this to my grandma as I collapsed in pain in the hallway. Posted before, but it got buried because I was late to that post. My scar is mostly concealed under my right eyebrow, in an arc following right along the center line. I was 17 weeks pregnant. That's almost halfway through. The baby died suddenly, and we had to wait until nature took its course, and so I had a late term miscarriage 7 days later after having to carry my dead child for a week. During the miscarriage, I bled so much I knew I would need to go to the ER. So naturally, it made sense to distressed and low on blood me to get up and get dressed first. I passed out from loss of blood, hit the wall head first, and my glasses frame broke and dug into my skin, leaving me with my eyebrow scar as the glasses were caught between the wall and my head as I slid down the wall to hit the floor. Now I have this concealed scar that looms emotionally large to me and constantly reminds me of the worst day of my adult life. Yay. I only have this scar on my knee where I bit a hole in it as a kid. I jumped off of a pavilion and the way I landed caused my face to thrust into my knee. Self-harm. Years and years ago I would cause gaping wounds on my arms and legs. They still look terrible today. The worst one was when I actually accidentally cut through part of my vein and had to go to the hospital just to spend the next month in a mental hospital. Attacked by 2 Rottweilers. Scars on my right elbow, left wrist, the worst area, back, and left and right calf. Essentially neighborhood to that were semi-mean semi-okay. I was petting them one day and one had an ear infection that I was not aware of, and when I stroked past his ear it obviously hurt him and he flipped. Then the other one joined in. Managed to get away pretty unharmed all things considered. Acne. When I was a toddler I had a stick and was poking our saint of a dog. My mum told me to stop. Being a precocious child I just smiled a wicked little grin and poked her one last time. Our perfect pup snapped at me and caught a tooth on my eyebrow. I think of that wonderful dog every day as I meticulously fill in my left eyebrow. We were riding bikes one day and our dogs, both absolute saints, were across the road in a blind corner area. When a car was cresting the hill, we started to call the dogs, as anxious little children do, to get them over to us. My mother was trying to stop me, so she pushed me or hit me in an attempt to make me shut up. I slipped off balance and knocked my tooth through my lip off my bare handlebars. I have a small scar that runs right down the middle of my chin from my lip. It has robbed me of the perfect dimple genetics awarded me. But both my beautiful dogs lived long happy lives. I have many scars on my meat suit, but the best is the 2 large surgery scars from snapping my radius and ulna in a riding accident. I now have a large scar on each side, but this particular one runs down the inside of my forearm on my right, perfectly down the middle over the important veins. That's one I find most people notice but don't know how to handle. Is it from an attempt? How do you ask? I find people are very kind and cautious with me until I finally just tell them it's surgical. I work in business, so I tend to have to do a lot of handshaking where it pops out and becomes the most noticeable. Ducking horses. Tried to impress a girl. It worked. Might do again. I have a very high pain threshold, so my pranks usually involve me hurting myself. In DT class we were using hacksaws, the saws you use to cut metal, and I was joking about with some friends and made a fapping gesture with my hands. Some girl saw and called me disgusting and proceeded to say I don't deserve a hand if I was going to do that. She was one of those kids in Africa are worse than so be happy type people. So I grabbed the hacksaw and proceeded to begin sawing into my arm near my hand but not my wrist, stating well I might as well chop it off, eh? I got reported and sent to the medical room, but the look on her face was amazing. I'd nearly gotten to the bone and she was screaming. Police officers of Reddit, what is your best I think we have the wrong person story? I remember when my son was 3 weeks old. It's 3 AM and I'm laying down on the couch. Baby is in his rocker. Suddenly there is loud knocking on my door followed by police. I thought for sure it was my friends coming back from the bar and they needed a place to crash. And they have done that police knock to me before. So I'm sitting there mad thinking, don't they know I just had a kid? Needless to say I didn't answer the door. Figured they could find somewhere else to crash. Next thing I know my door is kicked down. I grab baby and run towards the door and 4 or 5 police officers run in. They search my house with flashlights. Scared the crap out of my sleeping husband. My 5-year-old didn't wake up though lol. Turns out they had the wrong address. They apologized and a week later they installed a new door for me. But holy duck, that was scary. I was a curious little kid. My father stopped at the local liquor store to grab a bottle of wine and I was poking around. The door to the office was unlocked and I wandered inside. Sat in the chair and spun around a few times. Got bored. Wandered out. A few days later my father gets a call from the police. And we go in. As the officer is speaking to us I proceed to spun around in the chair and pick up and look at everything on his desk. After about a minute the officer says, "Thank you for coming in. I see what happened. You can go." In our family we had a great uncle who tattooed his name and social security number to his shoulder. Apparently he had the same name and birthday as another guy with a prison record. And had kept hearing about it. It came in handy at least twice when he was pulled over and the cops started arresting him. Each time he got out because he had his social security as proof that he was innocent. Not a police officer. But one night around 8 PM my fiance received a call. "Officer, Derek. We have your health card. Tell us your whereabouts right now." Fiance, "This isn't Derek." "Oh, you sound like Derek. Your buddies ratted you out and gave us your number. Now where are you?" "I'm not Derek and I'm not telling you where I am." "Oh, this is Officer Smith. Stop messing around and tell us your location." Derek. Again. Derek is not my name. How do I know you're a real officer? Oh, boy. If you don't tell me where you are, you're going to be in much more trouble. My badge number is blank. Okay, fine. I'm at home at blank. If you don't show up in a police car, I'm not coming out. He hung up the phone. Dialed 911 calls. We live in a bad area and wasn't sure if this was a fake call or not. Operator verifies that it was a correct badge number. The officer called back. He apologized. But still blamed my fiance because you were being very defensive and sounded guilty. Since everyone else isn't a cop. I was 16 and worked at a golf course mowing lawns and such. We got a call at home from the cops that said I'm a suspect in a hit and run accident because my plates were on the car that drove away without stopping. The cops said the car was maroon colored, my car was gray. We told them and figured that was that. The next day at work there was a minor accident. A dumbass co-worker pulled a metal rake too hard and the rack holding it came down onto my forehead. It wasn't a deep wound, but it bled a lot. My boss took me to the ER to get my head super glued. And to be safe, took me home too. Thus my car stayed at the golf course. That evening a cop comes by and finds me with a head wound and my car is missing. I look quite guilty. By sheer luck. The cop calls someone after talking to my parents and discovers they got the guy and the plate numbers were close. I probably would have been arrested. Someone had stolen a car and I went to go check it out. I'm driving behind what I think is a car. It had the same color vehicle and same car and the mistake I made was not matching the license plates. I pulled them over. Got out the car and realized it was my friend with his family. I reread the license plate and I noticed they were the same except for the last letter on the plate. The last letter on the stolen car was J. The last letter on my friend's was I. I laughed it off and apologized and we went out to dinner later that night. There had been a string of robberies, 7 in 2 weeks, in my neighborhood. So everyone was on high alert. I was home by myself, and one of my dogs started puking. So I rushed to let him outside, forgetting my dad had set the alarm. We had a silent alarm, so I had no clue it had been tripped. Sending out a dispatch request to the local 5-0. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I'm young, home alone by myself, and had been told to never answer the door if I was alone. So I didn't. They kept knocking. Long story short, they broke the door down. They thought they had caught the burglars. Multiple cars. I vaguely remember there being a K9 unit involved. And the police had their suspect, a 9-year-old girl, crying her eyes out. I was not the group of thieves who ended up being caught about a week later. Not an officer, but I live in a neighborhood in Indy that is going through a major revitalization right now. So it's very much in a transitional phase. We rent a house from a good friend of ours. He bought the house from some garbage people who had lived there for a long time. These people did. Sold. Made Drew Gus. Prostitution. Everything. In general, the house was disgusting. Unlivable. Really. Just the worst. Well, the scumbags who lived here still try to use our address even after 5 years. About a year and a half ago, one of the dudes used our address to renew his driver's license at the BMV. He even had the audacity to leave a note for us to call him when the license came in. Fast forward a few months. Around Christmas time. We are all sitting around, watching TV when we get a knock on the door. My husband answers it, and it's a SWAT team with guns drawn. They see my husband, who does not look like a methed out crackhead. And inside are our 2 little boys, my parents, and me nursing our baby, plus the Christmas tree and all the lovely trappings of our home. They immediately put their gums down, and my husband and I have a lovely chat with them. Yeah, they had our house surrounded, gums drawn, the whole shebang, looking for this dude who was wanted on some kind of violent felony. We were pissed at this dude, who I refer to as Big Nasty. Well, like many other posts, I'm not a PO, but I did get felony stopped while on Las Vegas BLVD. I left work, pulled out of the parking garage and turned right on Tropicana. I then see lights behind me and start to pull over, thinking it was an emergency vehicle. I am then surrounded by police with guns drawn. This was like midnight on the strip, so it was intense. Police make get out walk backwards with my hands on my head. They cuff me and tear into my car almost immediately. Long story short, it was another Mustang with out-of-state tags involved in a robbery. That was an intense evening. Police stopped me once and asked me to get in the car cause I fit the description of someone they were looking for, but they checked my ID and everything was cool. I asked them if they'd drop me home while I'm in the car and said it'd be hilarious if they came to the front door with me to freak my mum out. She came to the door, and as soon as she saw the police, her face was the angriest I've ever seen. It was hilarious. Not a police officer, but the person they talked to. I had just finished a cooking class and my husband was waiting for me. It was 9:30 at night and the parking for the class was in a back alley. Before we left, the officers turned on their lights and asked for identification and registration. They said, in their system, our plates were registered to a green vehicle, ours was white. They let us go on our way since the registration was all correct, but told us to talk to the DMV and get it cleared up. The next day I went to the DMV and they said that the only car with those plates was our current vehicle. Best we can figure is that we purchased this car in September, and in August, our DMV had switched to a new computer system. Was registered to our old vehicle. On the new system, they were registered to the new vehicle. And the police were still looking at the old system. This was in February. So 6 months after the switch over. I have to wonder how many other people they had incorrect vehicle information on. I am not a police officer. However, I was the person detained, in handcuffs, by the police due to a bank robbery nearby. It took place in Brownsville, NY. I was driving a 2-door grey 89 feet Buick. I am a 5 feet 7 inches Caucasian male. BTW, this took place during the middle of a beautiful spring day. I mention this because there was no mistaking what I looked like. They held me for about an hour in the back of a police car. After they released me, they told me the bank footage showed the criminal was approximately a 6 feet 4 inches African American male driving a purple 4-door Chevy. No apologies, just told me to be on my way. I did not have a cell phone back in '91, so I went to the closest payphone and explained what happened to my boss, so they can call my next customer and explain why I will be late. Obligatory, not a police officer. But I travel frequently across the Canada-US border. Sometimes by bus. On one bus trip, the whole bus was held up by one woman, who was pulled back to be interrogated. An hour later, she gets back on the bus, announcing that there was a person on the most wanted list with her same name. However, that person was a 5 feet 4 white male, and she was a relatively tall, probably 5 feet 10, black woman. It took them an hour of interrogating her to realize they had the wrong person. Not a police officer, but I'm in a class called Wildlife Law Enforcement, which is taught by a game warden. They have police powers and can be called in if backup is needed. My teacher is a great dude and he loves stories. Anyways, my local police force has a way of capturing people with outstanding warrants that may or may not be common. What they do is send a letter to the perp saying they won a prize from the city. Apparently, however they deliver this makes it seem very legit. To receive your prize, you have to go to the community center at a certain date and time. Then the police get you after you sign in for your prize. So in my city they set up this and sent a letter to a particular man with a very recognizable name. The day of the prize, claiming this very large old man comes in and is soon fighting against 3 officers in this community center, claiming he fought pretty damn hard thinking he was being jumped, but of course got cuffed and stuffed in the back of a squad car. The issue? They didn't check the important detail of age. They captured Senior when JR was the one with the warrant. They assumed because of this man's very recognizable name that there could only be one. Was on the receiving end. Went to the local sheriff's office to renew my CHL. Turn in my paperwork and wait in the waiting room in front of the window. Little while later an officer walks in and says, "MR. Name I didn't catch. We have reason to believe there's a warrant out for your arrest." I said, "I'm sorry. What name did you say? What's your last name?" Officer walks into room. Him and gal walk away from the window talking. Officer walks back out to me. "I'm sorry. I was told the man in the tan pants in the waiting room, I definitely matched that description." We laughed. He apologized some more and walked off. I finish up my business and walk to the elevator to leave. Doors open and guess who it is? Same officer. He apologized again and told me he had the wrong waiting room. Sheriff's office was in the basement. Good times. I was in the wrong car several years ago. Driving home from a friend's house late one night. Myself and the friends I was with got pulled over by an ARC. Apparently some giant drug bust went down and one of the meth cooks fled in the same model vehicle. We found this out cause the local sheriff was called for backup to watch us while the narcs searched the car. The sheriff thought it was funny cause my friend and I had been out playing board games. So the trunk was full of game boxes that the narcs wanted to search through. It took something like 45 minutes before the narcs accepted that boxes of Settlers of Catan and Axis and allies were not secretly full of meth. Fortunately, after the narcs gave up, the sheriff helped us reload the trunk while the narcs went off to search for their suspect again. Extra nice thing is that we were definitely speeding, but didn't get a ticket cause the narcs had bigger fish and the sheriff didn't care enough to follow up on the speeding. I'm a lawyer for the police. I defended an officer who was chasing a bad guy and lost him in the courtyard of an apartment complex and then ran into the back of the wrong apartment and tackled and tased an old man watching Saturday morning cartoons in his underwear eating Fruit Loops. The city paid that man some money. I went to jail for a few days when I was younger and one of the guys in there got caught because the cops mistook for someone else. He had a warrant out for failure to appear and changed up his hair and clothing style to try and look a bit different. But he happened to end up matching the description of someone else the cops were looking for. They just wanted to ask him some questions. But when they eventually found out who he was, they took him in on his warrant. That time I got pulled over as a suspected bank robber by 8 cop cars from 2 towns. I had about 15 cops pointing their guns at me while I'm wondering what the hell I did. Not a police officer. But my dad once almost got taken into custody because our car's license plate matched one that had been stolen. And they'd incorrectly written down the stolen plate, mixed up an O and a 0 or something like that. Not the police guy. But a bus I was on was stopped and they questioned me and searched my stuff on the side of the road for ages because apparently I look similar to someone they were after for human trafficking. At least that's what I'm assuming from the questions they asked. Weird day that was. Not a cop, but got confused for a wanted guy apparently. Transferred at the main railway station of my city from the train to the bus. The moment I see the overview board I start to run to catch my bus home. What I didn't know, 2 undercover cops were tailing me because they were looking for somebody who kinda looked like me. When I broke into a run they thought I made them and tried to run. Long story short, they tackled me from the back and totally off-guard thinking I'm being mugged. I cursed and tried to fight back. Of course they got me under control after a few moments. After they found out I wasn't the one they were looking for, they apologized kinda awkwardly and were gone. And I missed my bus.